Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to ATSSA's webinar on digital and banking scams, what you must know. This webinar is presented by ATSSA's Risk Management Council. Right now, our industry, as well as everyone else, is facing different cyber threats. It is affecting businesses. It's creating financial losses and reputational losses. And the ATSSA Risk Management Council wanted to put together this webinar to really help educate our ATSSA members with knowledge and tools necessary to prevent these losses, prevent cyber fraud. And in this panel, you'll have some experts and also some of our ATSSA members sharing their story of what they have gone through and how they are recovering, and in some cases, still in that process. To lead us through this, we have our moderator, Greg Driscoll. He will be leading us through all the various discussions. If you have any questions in Zoom, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. It has a little chat box with a question mark in it. Please go ahead and put your questions in there, and then we will go ahead and answer those during the Q&A session at the end of this webinar. And right now, I'm going to go ahead. Thank you guys for being here and turn it over to Greg.
Thanks, Jason. As a matter of introduction, for those that aren't familiar with me, my name is Greg Driscoll. I'm a 3-decade veteran in the road safety infrastructure industry. Probably been involved in ATSSA leadership for about 25 years. I've been both on the C-suite and the ownership side of business operations. And I'm currently the Chief Operating Officer of Limtech Scientific, where we develop and manufacture automated technologies for the road construction industry. We have with us today, if you'll, thank you. We have Chris Rossiter from TMI Services. We have Jody Barnes with Ingevity, and then we have Kyle. Kyle is our expert today. Actually, we've all kind of become our own experts from our experiences, but from R3. I'm really excited for ATSSA's effort to provide this resource for its members. This topic is close to home for many of us. For, I guess, more than a decade, we've heard the horror stories from about these cyber attacks on all these large well-known companies and so forth, and some of the largest organizations in the world have been struck by this. But it seems that now we're the vulnerable targets, and these criminals are costing us peace, costing us profits, and in some cases, a few cases, it's costing businesses. And so I'm really glad we're here today. I found that you don't have to be a fool to be duked out of tens, thousands, hundreds of thousands, and even millions of dollars. It's usually bright, experienced business leaders like us that are being targeted, successfully targeted. So I think that the scale and the expertise of these scams have reached a level that it seems almost undetectable. So that's why we're here today, and we're gonna share our stories. A couple of us are gonna share our stories, and then we're gonna hear from Kyle. And this is supposed to be, really open. It is a panel, so please ask your questions. I'll be asking some questions as we move through. I'll start out real quickly with my the short version of my story. I have been because I have. I've actually been on both ends. I think Chris is going to join me on that one. I've been on both ends of this of bank fraud, and that's the cybersecurity issue that we've run into. I have been a payee and payor, and if I have my choice, I'd rather be the one getting paid rather than being the one paying. Neither experience was good, and that's unfortunate because no matter what happens. Nobody wins in this game, and it's tough. So in my particular case, on the side where I actually paid a vendor, I received an urgent email from my vendor of a past bill, and frankly, it was past due. So it caught my attention. I went to accounting, looked, and we had not paid that yet. and they said, we need this paid right now. There was a very big sense of urgency. They said this is we had never sent this company an ACH transaction, but they were asking for it. And we had really been trying to keep up with things and become more of an online banking company and quit writing checks. So we saw this as a great opportunity, and we sent this company about $20,000. About a month later, I got a call from the CFO, and he was wondering where his money was. And so I said, "Well, I sent it." Um, so that was my first experience. The second experience, I was on the other side. My customer ended up uh, sending money to the bad guys themselves. How both of these happened was where they had come in. Evidently, the perpetrator has come in on the backside, and they get in, and Kyle and probably even Jody's going to talk more about this, but they'll come in and they'll set in on your email, and they'll be somehow they get into your system and they can monitor, and it may be the payer or the payee. It doesn't, that's one of the difficulties in this whole process is trying to point the finger and accurately. But we had you have this where they come in and they sit on and they watch for a transaction, it seems, and then as they find a transaction that's about to happen, they'll step in. In my particular case, where I was the receiver of the funds, or supposed to be the receiver of the funds, they had actually duplicated my signature block on my email, sent it, and I'm sure that that others, even on this call, are familiar with this process, but they used my signature block and they went out to my customer and they said, "Hey, it's Greg, and we have changed our ACH, our banking information, and please remit to this address." And in our particular case, it was a good customer, somebody that we knew was going to pay. So when the payment didn't come right away, we didn't really think too much about it. And then about 2 weeks later, like the CFO did to me on the other side, I called up and I said, "Hey, you guys gonna pay this bill?" And they said, "Oh, we paid it 2 weeks ago." And I said, "Well, where did you pay it?" We paid it exactly where you told us to pay it. And I said, "I haven't told you to pay it anywhere, you know." So he sent me the email. I looked at it, and in this particular case, kind of a common thing they do is they'll change one letter in this was for limtech.com, LIMNTECH, and I think they put an S in there. Sometimes they'll put just an odd letter in there that you don't expect, that you don't read, and and so therefore, of course, even if he would have responded, it would have went back to that person and not to me, and they could have continued on with the hoax. So a terrible situation. We the probably the worst part, besides losing the money, the second worst part is all the taxing work that you have to do to try to figure out what the heck happened. Going back and doing your own research and then hiring somebody like Kyle to come in and do some research and try to figure out, what the heck happened? Where was the breakdown? And the worst part for us was just the pointing of the fingers. And whose fault was it? And it's a horrible thing to have to go through. I don't wish it on anyone, and that's why I'm so passionate about having this webinar and talking about it. I will say there's a little stigma about sharing this information. Kudos to Jody and Chris for stepping up, because we know a lot more people have been affected by this. A lot more members have been affected by this, and it's hard to step up because you do think, well, you feel the fool, and it's just not the case. These guys are really good, and we've got to come up with ways to protect ourselves. I'll end with this. Probably, if I was to select one thing that we did, one change that we did, it would be that for any change in bank transactions or banking information, any change, we actually tell our customers to do this when we send them any changes. We tell our customers, and we also follow the process of sending a test deposit. So we'll send a $10, a $5, even I've seen people send a $1 deposit to our account. They would confirm that it's been received, and then they can go ahead and process the other 100 grand or whatever. So I think that out of everything we want to talk a lot about, how we scan things and how we protect ourselves and so forth. But out of everything we did, I mean, that's the tail end of protecting yourself. There's a lot we should be doing on the front end, of course. But that's what I found to be probably the best thing that we put in place is the requirement. Or again, we do have customers that just won't follow it, even if we ask them to do it, which it's obviously they just haven't been bit by this monster yet. So that's my story, and I'd like to invite Chris Rossiter with TMI Services out of the Carolinas, to come in and tell us a little bit about what you went through and what your response was and what are you doing now to protect yourself?
Thanks, Greg. And for those who don't know me, I am
Can you
Chris
hear me,
Rossler.
Chris? Yeah. Huh?
Yeah, can you hear me? You can hear me? Okay.
Yes, got
So,
it.
great. So, I am Chris Rossiter, President and Managing Partner of TMI Services, here in the Carolinas. In a lot of ways, Greg, you and I can just swap names because the stories are very, very similar, in the business for 30 years,
Hmm.
experienced, different levels, on both sides of this issue as payee and payor. You mentioned earlier about, over the last decade, how much advancement has gone into these bad actors and everything that they're doing. It reminded me that I had a situation a number of years back where the theft of my money was they took a check out of my mailbox. So it's just progressed to what can we do electronically now? So they're taking money out of your bank, via email. And in the case where I was I was the one to receive funds. We had a project with a contractor, and as part of setting that up, and we had a long history with this client, but they were going to, like you had mentioned, they wanted to get away from checks, so they were setting up ACH, and we encourage ACH. I pay ACH. I like to get paid ACH much faster and safer. So we completed an ACH form, and emailed that out. Then we go on performing the work, and after a while, we're looking at our age receivables, and it's like we're not getting paid. So reach out to the client and say, hey, North Carolina is a prompt payment state, so you're required to get paid in so many days from the time that the state pays. And we see that they've been paid. It's all public knowledge. So we look up that they've been paid. So where's mine? So we contact the client, say, hey, when can we expect payment? And they say, well, we've already sent payment. So, well, again, where did you send it to? And in that, what we found was that the bad actor had managed to get their hands on that ACH document, modify it with their information, started a bogus account with abbreviated names mimicking mine, sent that over. But what was important about them getting a hold of that document was the fact that it had an original signature on it. So they could modify
Oh,
numbers and resend that same document, which made it look legit, like it came from us. Now you can clearly see that the changes were made, but we were not notified of that change. But we also found that not only did that happen, but the way a lot of these bad actors work that we find is that once they're compromised or found out, they'll close that account, move all the money to a new account, and try it again. So then a second time it did it. And we're well into some pretty heavy six figures, at this point that we have not received. But on their end, obviously they paid it. So we had to bring in a forensic IT specialist to dig into it. And although we found that the initiating email did not come from our server, we did find that prior to that there was malware on there. And that obviously threw up a red flag. You had mentioned that it's difficult to share sometimes because we feel the fool. And that may be true, but what was very enlightening to me on this is that what I was extremely uneducated.
Mm.
And back to the point of this webinar itself, it's for the purpose of, let's share these stories because if we can prevent somebody from this happening to just by educating them, hopefully it'll help. So in our case, we had to take a deep dive in there, and we found that some of our practices and procedures were substandard. So we had to implement, tighter policies, including the fact that, like you said, you make those contacts. Well, any changes whatsoever have to be, in the world they call it social engineering, to make a human contact with a known source. So if we receive a change, even from, go back to where we're the payor. When that happened to us, we failed that social engineering. So we had to learn that if I receive an email like that, having one of my vendors wanting me to pay, then we need to verify that it's changed. And of course, first thing maybe some of our members, and even the first thing that even my staff may have said is that, well, I don't know who to contact. And that may be true, but I can assure you that if you pick up the phone and call your sales rep and say, "Hey, I've got this information from your AP department, your AR department, want me to change this bank. Can you find out if it's true?" You do have a contact. Yeah,
Mm.
it may take a little bit of work, even if it means contacting your sales rep. Run those numbers down because, in the aspect of changing the number in my name, is as TMI is very common. It's common to see the M being replaced by an RN because when the R and N are next to each, if you're not paying attention, it looks like an M. So a lot of spoofing will
Mm.
come from that, or they'll change the I to a capital or to a lowercase L. So they're trying to hide these numbers in there, and if you're not paying attention, it can get by. So we do a lot of work with our staff in respect to educating them to don't click on an unknown email, don't click on an unknown attachment. We have ESET security in there for our firewall protection, but stuff's going to get through, and we have to educate our staff to make sure that we're not blindly just linking into that. So that's a little bit about what my story is, and I think you may even see it next. And Kyle, I apologize, I'm going to steal it because, like I said, we live it. The old saying, "Trust but verify," doesn't work in the IT field. You never trust, you always verify, because anything can get through very simply, and very fast, and it can be very, very costly, especially the more advancement with AI comes about.
How difficult, Chris, has it been to get your culture changed to where they kind of live in the yellow flag world instead of the green flag? Everybody's honest, everybody, I mean that type of thing. Because again, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars here, that's at stake. What have you done to try to reinforce the culture of trust but verify, or don't trust, verify, as you said?
Yeah. That's a great question, Greg, because I at a point, as we were dealing with this, it was almost like salt in my wound, because it was very difficult to have, that culture shift of doing something different. But when you go through and you're able to lay out, okay, this is how it happened, and here's the document that they used, and it's got your signature on it, right? This is your signature. So, and not to get ugly about it, but understand to say this is how smart they are, and it's
Mhm.
our job to be smarter or at least more diligent. So it was difficult not to get frustrated through that transition because I wouldn't call it pushback so much as maybe it wasn't taken as serious as it should have
Mhm.
been. But when you
Right.
lay out those invoices that you have open that are well into, a couple $100,000, and you're laying out the emails that say this is how it happened, then it helps kind of drive home the point that, okay, they are getting smart, and inadvertently, I may or may not have contributed to this. Yeah, and they take some self accountability for that. And you get the buy-in from your staff, understanding, hey, what their role in this and what their responsibilities to protect you, your company as well.
Great, great. Yeah, I can see. And I guess, the bigger you are, the more hands you have involved and people and so forth. So that's a bigger culture you have to change. And speaking of that, let's move over to Jody. Jody Barnes is with Ingevity. They're a larger company. He's actually their VP of IT. He's the CIO. He has a lot of experience with this, both with Ingevity and some previous places of work. And fortunately, I understand, Jody, there's been quite a few events, but fortunately, through your practices and so forth, and as you said earlier, a little bit of luck, you haven't had a material breach yet. Why don't you share some of your story?
Sure. Thanks, Greg. And Chris, I'm going to steal that never trust, always verify. That's a good mantra to use in my upcoming town halls with our company. But yeah, I've been with Ingevity for about 9 years now. I also serve as their Chief Information Security Officer. I have a dual role. But prior to that, I spent almost 10 years in the utility industry, critical infrastructure, and really it's where I got a lot of the training on how to protect sensitive environments, and I brought that knowledge and that skill set to Ingevity as we started to build our cybersecurity program. Really, it was from the ground up. It was pretty greenfield. We didn't have a lot of protections when I got here, but over time we've matured our security posture, and I'm here to tell you, it doesn't matter how many tools you have in place or how strong you think your protections are. There is no silver bullet, and it's just a matter of time. It's not. I'm sure you've heard. It's not if, it's when. It's just a matter of time before someone is breached or compromised, and you may be impacted from that. One of the more recent incidents that happened, and I call it an event. I have been involved in ransomware incidents in previous companies. I was also in healthcare and telecom, but fortunately, we haven't suffered a material breach here at Ingevity, but we have had events. And one of the things that was mentioned a few times by Chris was sensitive information, the ACH document, or in our case, it was our customer list. So we have employees that maybe send a customer list, whatever the itinerary may be for that information. It's emailed back and forth internally, and sometimes on an email, if you're sending it to a recipient, it'll autofill that address. And if you're not careful, you wind up sending it to an unintended recipient. And that's basically how a customer list got out of our environment. Now, we weren't too much aware of what was going on or that it even had happened until after the fact. But just to kind of paint the picture of what happened, at some point in time, there was a bad person, a threat actor, that got a hold of this customer list. And they proceeded to stand up a Ingevity-like domain. And we call this domain squatting. So what they do is, instead of the I in Ingevity, they make it a 1, or Ingevity with an S on the end of it, or they change the letters. It's just a little bit different, and they create this fakeingevity.com domain. They have to register that domain for it to be present on the internet. And they stood up this Ingevity-like webpage. And so the second half of that is they establish an email server. That's how they can send fake emails to your company or to your customers. So once they had that established, they took this customer list and they proceeded to send emails to our customers requesting change to bank account information. Now, this was manufactured emails. This wasn't an out of the blue, you get an email and it was just, you get this plain email that says, hey, we're changing our bank account. They went to great lengths to make it more convincing. And it's pretty easy to figure out who needs to be in those threads. You can do some social engineering, go on LinkedIn or go on some public websites and find out who the CFO is, or other individuals that may be involved in banking or accounts payable or accounts receivable. It's pretty easy to find that information. And with a little bit of homework, you can manufacture an email that never existed. and you can have a thread that goes back for days or weeks or maybe even a couple of months. And it looks like this huge conversation that's taken place with people that you trust, CFOs and CEOs. And then all of a sudden now this email has been sent to you from a fake Ingevity address, but you don't catch it. You see this long thread. It's very convincing. You're like, oh, wow, I see the CEO and the CFO are on this, which is completely fake. And they move forward with changing the bank account information. And then they make payments that never, of course, never reach us. And it's the same story that Chris talked about is, hey, we sent the payment and, we never got it. And it can get into, the 6-figure realm. So we proceeded to detect that those domains have been stood up or an email service been stood up. You got to have a service to do that. And a lot of people don't have, those capabilities, but we did, and we were able to legally take that domain down and that email server down to prevent further damage. But after we had discovered what had happened, we of course started communicating with our customers. And that's the more important thing is when you see or aware of activity that could compromise you or disclosure of sensitive information inadvertently, it's important for you to communicate with your customers and your business partners to let them know that, hey, this happened. If you see suspicious email communication come through that's kind of out of the blue, urgent, or what have you, make sure you double check. And by double check, it's not you get the email and you respond to that email because it's a bad email to begin with. You got to be very careful about how you verify what's being asked of you. And I would say you probably want to have a 2-step verification process where you are actually contacting named individuals with documented contact information, whether it's a phone number or an email address. If you're going to send an email, start off with a brand new email. Don't respond to the email that you got because you could be responding straight back to the threat actor. Phone calls are even more secure, and not just one, but a second contact before you make that change. And that's some of the changes that we made. But one of the bigger things that we're doing to help our customer base is we are partners in business. And I'm just as concerned about their financial well-being as I am my own, because if they're not doing well, then that impacts our bottom line as well. So we want them to be able to successfully make payments to us, as well as our ability to make payments to the right bank accounts as well. So we share information. We have calls. We create awareness, and when these events do happen, we communicate internally. And if it means a town hall or a conference call like this internally, or an email address that goes out to all employees to make them aware that this activity is going on, I strongly encourage that you do that. Make sure you get your CEOs and your executive team supporting those efforts and create some airtime to develop in that material so that they're aware of what's going on. A lot of that stuff's going on with SMS text messages on phones and stuff. We see a lot of that. I don't know if you know a lot about Ingevity, but we just got a new CEO a couple of months ago. And we immediately started getting fake text messages to our employees from supposedly our new CEO, asking them to do, financial transactions and what have you. So we send that communication out. Hey, this text messaging campaign is going on. Beware. Don't act on it. Never trust, always verify.
Thanks for sharing that. One of my thoughts is we go back to this. Maybe I'm looking for something to make myself feel better, but going back to this, you don't have to be a fool to fall for this stuff. This is now when you go back and look and you think, oh, I should have caught that, or oh, I should have caught this, but you can see that the techniques that are being used are becoming far more sophisticated than ever before. And but Jody, I liked what you said about not doing a reply from, I mean, it sounds simple. It sounds like something obviously you wouldn't do, but we do reply so often, and kind of makes me think, I don't know if I want to reply to anything anymore. I think I'm going to do a fresh email because that's going to knock out a lot of these other things that could be happening where, a bogus person is getting a copy as well or something of that sort. But I thought that was really interesting. Well, thanks. And I'm curious. So you have, I mean, that's one of your primary jobs is really watching over. A lot of us don't have we don't have a Jody Barnes. I think that our the bad actors. One of the reasons they're coming after us is because we do large transactions and we're small organizations. And I think that's why our industry is being hit harder and harder because, a truckload of thermoplastic or shoot, a, a striping rig, those kind of transactions, those are big transactions, and we're all so small. I mean, it's not all so small, but there's a lot of us out there that are mid-size. You don't have to be small, but a mid-sized company that doesn't have a Jody Barnes. Any suggestion on that? I know we'll get to Kyle on some of his material and so forth, but from an internal perspective, what do you have any suggestions for what we might do, me and the Chris Rossiters and the others that are maybe online here?
Well, there's a lot of
As far
free
as,
information.
I'm sorry, as far as assigning, I want to clarify that. As far as assigning a person or how do we get a Jody Barnes in our organization, even if it's a little part-time-ish, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And, you can have a cyber ambassador of your company. It doesn't necessarily be,
Right.
cyber expert, but be that point person they need to have an interest and somewhat of a passion to learn this stuff and to bring, knowledge to the company. And there's uh, resources online where a lot of information and tactics and um, ways you can defend yourself, it's free. And there's a couple of them I can name right off the bat. CISA.gov, CISA.gov, which is a cyber and infrastructure security agency. They have a lot of material and a lot of information, and they give you updates on breaches that have happened around the U.S. and globally as well. And then NIST, which is the National Institute of Science and Technology, they have a cybersecurity division as well, and there's a lot of material there that you can get to help with security awareness campaigns, if to help educate your employees. That's what I would recommend as far as education. But the people part of it is the awareness that these things happen is the more important. The more you can communicate, the better.
Yeah, I guess the smaller you are, the more ambassadors you have to have, because everybody's touching the money when you're small, a lot of our contractors. I can see
But
that.
I would say, for these smaller companies, you should have an internal conversation, a tabletop exercise. Like what would happen if this happened? What does that mean? How would we react to it? Who would respond? How would we recover? What operations would be impacted?
Yeah.
What's our
Well,
contingency plan?
that's great, and that's a good segue into Kyle. And Kyle is our panel expert here. Of course, like I said, we kind of all become our own experts, unfortunately, or experts through experience. Kyle, welcome. If you'll introduce yourself, and then maybe I'll just kind of hand it over to you, and I'm going to ask you a lot of questions, I'm sure.
Excellent. Well, thanks everyone for joining. My name is Kyle McNaney. I am with R3. R3 is a managed service provider, and we deal with these kind of things on a regular basis for our customers. We help our customers through these events. We help prevent and prepare for these things to happen. As you all may have heard, there's no silver bullet here. It's only a matter of time of when one of these things, will crop up in your organization. Unfortunately, that is the case. And so, that's what we're here for, is to help everyone prepare for that, and really how to spot things. Um, so, spotting cyber threats. Um, these threat actors are they're really going to tug on your emotions. They're going to make you feel rushed. They're going to pressure you into responding quickly and taking quick action. They're going to send emails that may look like your customer emails or someone you've traded emails with in the past, but they're going to be slightly off. So you should be looking for those kind of indicators. In most cases, an invoice doesn't need to be paid that moment. You could take a step back and, as Jody alluded to earlier, you should reach out to a point of contact that you validated their phone number, send a new email to that person to validate that. Um, you should be double checking before you're sending any money or personal information. I think this goes without saying, but unfortunately, this happens all too often where one of these events will pop up. The threat actors will be asking to invoice something or to send payment immediately, and it's a large amount of money, and they're asking to be sent to a new bank that you're not familiar with. You have to enter it in the system somewhere. So you should be double checking, with multiple individuals at that organization just to make sure that this is indeed, who it came or who it says it's coming from. Um, some other red flags. Now, recently this has gotten a bit, more sophisticated, but there are some things you can point out in these emails. There's bad grammar, spelling mistakes, logos that don't line up with what the company's logo is, or they use generic greetings, things that just don't seem normal. Again, never trust, always verify, reach out to those individuals that would normally send those through a separate email chain. Um, eh, and when in doubt, just call the person. It's much safer to verify using a phone number that you have talked to a person on the phone before, rather than try to share, an email back and forth. We've seen on many occasions where someone will email back, whether it's a new email that they start, or if it's a replying to a chain. And sometimes these organizations are compromised, and so someone's sitting in their email and they're actually live. They're sitting in their email account. They're responding to emails as if they were that person. It's a very real scenario. We've run into this many times, and so in that case, it's best to call that person. And again, as Jody mentioned, call a couple different people just to make sure, especially if you've never spoken to one of these individuals over the phone, you don't know how they sound. It's always good to verify with a few individuals. And
Well,
then finally, if you see something going on, say something. If it's suspicious at all, bring it up to your manager. If you have an IT department or if you have a provider that's providing IT services, don't be afraid to reach out. Unfortunately, we see all too often where individuals may have been compromised and they're unfortunately too embarrassed to admit it, to bring it up. And so it goes on, for a couple of hours, sometimes a few days before they say anything. And at that point, the threat actors have been in the environment, wreaking havoc. They may have already exfiltrated data. They may have already received payments, and they're trying to get more and more. The best thing to do in this instance is bring it up as soon as you know, or as soon as you feel something is just off. The quicker that your organization, your IT department, your IT provider is aware of these things, the quicker they can shut them down.
Kyle, thank you. This is a great list. I'm thinking of a few things that I've run into, and that one is the field rush. That's not. I mean, every time I've seen one of these, whether in the two cases we actually had, we were actually impacted by it. We had a material breach. But before that, even these others, that it seems like they're always rushed. It seems like they're always, let's say a piece. I can see our guys. I can see a piece of equipment that's being built, and they get an invoice, and they say, "Hey, you have to make a partial payment here. We're not going to move any further on this truck," or whatever it might be, or repair or something like that. Another thing that I caught on my end was when I looked at the documentation that they said that I had sent them. it was very obvious to me that our logo had been taken off the internet because it was such a low resolution, and it honestly it didn't look that professional. So I was a little surprised, that it wasn't noticed. But I have seen that. And something else I was just thinking of was I think these days a lot of us use, and I'm one of them. We use our Outlook or our email server as our file drawer. We keep documents in there that we have sent, that we've received. There's there's a lot of data in there because I'll tell you sometimes when I'm looking for something, I'll just go to Outlook and find it because it's a lot faster than trying to find it on my computer, on my files, on my hard drive. So okay, I admit it. So I can see that access into our email servers and stuff like that could be very problematic. Chris, when you look at this list, is there anything that stands out to you that kind of almost if you would have known this or something that you saw or if you would have known it, it might have been helpful?
The with the tone of the email, that kind of stands out because it's almost, and this is what we were talking about before, how AI is coming on board with taking that tone out of it and making it more natural speaking. They're
Hmm.
trying to get
Hmm.
smarter with it, so it was almost a little easier to see, these red flags. But
Hmm.
the smarter that the bad actors get, the smarter that AI gets, the harder those red flags are going to be. And you've heard everybody else say that, it's not a matter of if, it's when. So just staying diligent on top of it to do everything you can to protect yourself. The one thing that I would add as far as, what may have helped us had we known at the time is how to protect that sensitive information that was sent. It's a standard practice now that if there's sensitive information necessary to send and you can't do some sort of a SharePoint with them, then you password protect it. And then you call them personally and give them the password over the phone. They can open it while you're on the phone with them. Because if they're compromised, you don't want to send the password in a different email because it might just get to that bad actor anyway. So whether we text a known number or call a known person, give them that password over the phone in order to open that documentation. So
That's a great idea. I hadn't thought about the passwording of the documents. That's a good
yeah,
idea.
the one thing that I would share with you on that though is that, especially because I love PDF. I am a fan of PDF, but you only get one shot at remembering that password. So if it's a very sensitive document, you want to password protect the one that you're going to send, but save yourself a copy on your own drive because if you don't remember that password, you are not opening it, which is why I love to password protect PDF files.
Great, great.
Yeah.
Jody, go ahead. Good, Kyle. Mhm.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note doing password protection, doing multi-factor verifications when you're sending emails like that have banking information in them. Not only for that instance, but if someone gets a hold of that person's email, you have no control over their environment. You may have some control over your environment with your own internal IT team, but you don't know what's going on in their environment. They may have an active breach and they don't even know. So by sending information like that, you're safeguarding your information now and then in the future because those emails are going to sit in their inbox for years. It's very important to do that for that reason as well.
Yeah. Chris?
I wanted to jump right on with that, what Kyle said, because it kind of touches on my experience on this particular one. Not knowing that they're compromised. So during that finger pointing process we were going to that you alluded to earlier, and going through the deep dive, oh, it's on your end, it's on your end. No, it's on your end or whatever. So um, there might have been a little bit of pleasure sending them their bad actor email, just to say no, as secure as you believe that you were not. here's your bad actor emails that came from your server, where the I and the L was interchanged, or the R and the N, et cetera, et cetera. So, but to that point of what Kyle was saying is that never assume it's them, never assume it's you. You have to verify where it came from, because it could possibly be on both ends, like it was in my situation.
Right. Why don't we go on over? Let's go to the next slide because I think this is where Jody can also can come in and talk a little bit about this as well. Kyle, share with us how we should respond to a breach because when this happens, we're like, first of all, as it was mentioned earlier, sometimes most of the time we don't even know it's happened until a week later. I know that there's some opportunities if you can find within the first 24, 48 hours especially if it's ACH to respond. But sometimes we don't know that. But how do you suggest that we respond?
Communication is key here. In these events, it's a lot of chaos, and there's also a lot of fact finding that needs to be done. So involving the right parties to establish that understanding of everything that's going on, who's impacted, um, uh, uh, making sure that these means of or the method in which you're communicating is secure. So again, keeping in mind that during these breaches there may be a threat actor in one of your users' mailboxes. They may be in the environment somewhere. So establishing a secure means of communication is really important here, even if that means picking up the phone, starting a Teams meeting with those involved. If you're in the office, bringing everybody into a room and discussing there, it kind of sounds, it almost sounds like doomsday scenario planning, but it really goes a long way into making sure that you're not communicating with the threat actor, who is, of course, going to say, "Oh no, everything's fine." Um, if there is, financial transactions involved here, bring your bank up to speed as soon as possible. If you have multiple banking or financial institutions, reach out to your point of contacts there and let them know what's going on. That way, in case they have, let's say, they have access to your bank account for some reason or another with a password and it's not secured, at least your bank can kind of put that the last bit of security on and just stop all transactions to make sure that there's no further financial loss. Of course, change the passwords of the email account, of the financial account, any account that's involved here that may be suspected to be involved. A lot of what we see is when a user is compromised, not only is their email compromised, but anything that they were saving in their web browser may be compromised. Unfortunately, that means a lot of password changes and some unhappy end users. But this is a real thing. It's these threat actors will try to maintain control, some level of control in the environment, and so even if that means they have a password of a system that doesn't seem too important, they still can use it as leverage to gain a foothold elsewhere. So it's very important to ensure that those are reset. Um, of course, cyber insurance, love it or hate it, it is extremely important to bring your insurance provider up to speed. They're going to help you with any of the damages. They're going to give you some tips and tricks on what you need to do in that specific scenario. They have a lot of resources at their disposal to help with that in terms of hey, we've had this happen before. Let's take this action. So that's very important to bring them up to speed. Um, in some cases, notifying law enforcement. I've had a few experiences where there's some things that they can do, some things that they can't do, but nevertheless, it's important to notify them, especially if there is a nation state threat actor that's out there that is actively trying to cause harm. They're They, of course, have a lot more resources at their disposal that they can do to help with these threats. Again, they're not always going to, I wouldn't always rely on them to help you respond, but they should be informed, and allow them to handle things from their perspective while you're also, going through your incident response procedures. Retaining evidence. This is pretty important. A lot of IT providers, the first thing that they'll jump to is just wiping the machine. And sometimes what that does is you lose that evidence. You have no idea how they got in. So maybe that machine was compromised, but maybe they use that machine to get in to other machines, or vice versa. And so, getting rid of the evidence, it's hard to track down, truly where they were, brought into. And then, of course, involving legal counsel, if your organization is required to report the incident.
I think you're on mute, Greg.
There you go. Thanks, Kyle, because I kind of wrote down the list. Internal communication, talk to your bank, change your passwords, get with your insurance company, talk to law enforcement, gather evidence, and get some legal counseling. I think that's a heck of a plan. I have a little issue with the whole law enforcement thing. I'm kind of glad you brought that up, that there's not, basically you're setting us up for understanding that not much is going to happen by doing that, that they should know, but it's kind of, I had an industry member that lost a large sum of money, and the complaint was, if I would have walked into a bank and taken $1.2 million by gunpoint, they would have found me within hours. And they're just ignoring. And here I am. The same thing really happened. It just wasn't with a gun, and they're ignoring it like it never happened. So that's a real struggle. But one of the issues that we struggled with. When you say law enforcement, are you saying federal agencies?
Yeah.
Who in law enforcement do we contact?
So there's a threshold, that they will, typically act on, and it is, it's the FBI is who we've worked with in the past. Unfortunately, if it's, $5,000, they're going to be, hey, sorry, here's some resources, go about your way to respond. But if it is a large sum, the FBI, we have worked with them in the past, and actually there are some instances where we've seen, that they are, especially in government agencies, government customers of ours, that they have spotted the threat. Don't ask me how they know this, but sometimes they have that information at their disposal. So again, it's, don't expect much out of it, but it still is good to at least bring them up to speed as best you can. There are resources out there that you can submit this information to. Um,
Great. Okay. And I'm going to get to you in a minute, Chris. I want to ask Jody. Jody, what out of when you're looking at this list, would you add anything to it, or would you emphasize any of those items?
Well, I would come back to the comment I made earlier on tabletop exercises. You need to get together internally and talk about these scenarios and how you respond to it. But also, for those of you that have cyber insurance or are considering cyber insurance, most cyber insurance companies have panels of companies affiliated with that coverage, and they can provide forensic support and response and recovery assistance as well. So those are the two things. But I want to touch on real quick. We talked about someone camping out in an email account or have it breached, and maybe they're sitting in your environment for a while because they stole credentials. That's how they do it. They have to know what your password is and your login name is, and a lot of times they'll create these websites that look almost identical to a Microsoft website to log in, or other websites. I've seen our Ingevity website look almost identical that the threat actor had stood up. But if you ever get an email, you shouldn't be clicking on links and attachments and emails unless you're very sure. But if you do, and there's a website that comes up and it looks and feels like, a Microsoft website or something, and it's asking you to put in your credentials again, that is a key indication that there's a threat actor on you and they're trying to steal your credentials. And then that's how they get into your environment. So just beware of that.
Wow, wow, that's a great tip. I have a question in a moment, but Chris, what do you got? What do you got?
Well, and I saw we just had a Q&A, so I want plenty of time to answer that one. And I think it might be for Kyle. But the one that stood out on here that I didn't recognize at the time, but in hindsight was very, very important is the retention of evidence that Kyle talked about. Because the first thought is, oh, yeah, we found this malware or whatever, wipe it, quarantine this. And that's exactly what we did. However, luckily we had the forethought to think, well, I'm going to need copies of that stuff. So I was able to save some quarantine copies of everything. And that came up, as recent as this incident happened, almost 2 years ago now. And a question about it came up last Thursday. And if I didn't have a reference to be able to go back through and find that, it would have been he said, she said, trying to remember, exactly how what was the time frame, who contacted who. We had all that information saved, but had we just done it on the initial reaction to just wipe it, then that could have been very, very problematic for us.
Yeah, I could see that. I see somebody's brought up a point here, and Kyle, I want to direct this to you. It says our bank offered us a universal payment identification code, a UPIC number, for masking our account number, uh, ACH payments. Can you talk a little bit about that? Are you with that process,
Yeah, so
Kyle?
that is a really good way to secure your bank accounts. It's also makes things convenient if you have, if you're changing banks or what have you. But essentially, that UPIC is, let's say your bank account. I'm just going to throw a number 123. That's your bank account, your number. What the UPIC will do is take that 123 and they'll change it to something completely random, and that's what you give out to organizations to get paid. And so what that does is provide a level of protection against your account. And so instead of giving out essentially that main bank account number, that main routing number, you're giving out something that's kind of masked that has a quote unquote shield in front of it. It's a good method to deter fraudulent activity. Again, there's no silver bullet. But it is an additional step you can take, and a lot of financial institutions will, they'll work with you to implement something like this.
Great, great, and thanks for bringing that up. Whoever that was, that's really cool. I'm going to look into that myself. Well, we're coming to the end of our time together, and I want everyone to know that that this isn't a one and done. We've been told that this is we're gonna continue this on. We may see some other events, or you'll probably see some publications. My guess, I don't want to put words in Jason's mouth there, but I know that this isn't the end of this. It's not the end of their attempt to attack. So it's certainly not the end of our efforts to respond. And we just really appreciate the having everyone here. Here's my last thing is tell everybody this is a serious issue, um, because you don't want it to happen to your friends. You don't even want it to happen to your competitors. This is an awful situation that can happen, and anything you can do to protect yourself beforehand and know how to respond afterwards, the better that is. Jason, will we be getting this list? Will you be distributing the list? And I believe a link to this webinar will be available as well, correct?
Yeah, correct. So probably tomorrow, you guys that are attending will receive an email for a survey. So if you could please fill that out, just to sort of get your thoughts on the webinar, the content, and this type of format. But also will be a link to a web page that will have a recording of this webinar, along with some of the resources and others that you guys can utilize to go ahead and help protect your business, develop various tools and processes to protect your business, do tabletop exercises and things like that. So we will have that as a page on our website, and we'll share that out tomorrow.
Well, I want to thank Chris. Thank you for stepping up and sharing your story. Jody, thanks for bringing in your experience and expertise in this situation. Of course, thank you, Kyle, and thanks, Jason, for putting all this together and getting these folks together. So we really appreciate it. And until next time.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.